I can't do eyes. I cannot do hello. It says the question is it okay to drink 5 chais a day? And absolutely not. I don't think it is okay to drink anything more than 2 cups of chais per day because the amount of caffeine that you're going to be putting into your body is not okay. And I would still say that don't have any chai or any caffeine after like maybe a 2 or 3 p.m. That's the best way to take it. So 5 chai, definitely a big no. I don't know why am I getting all the funny questions to begin with, but the question is, why does spicy food feel great going in and terrible coming out? So I think I'd make a smaller correction to the statement here, or the question. It doesn't feel great for most of the people. I think it's just few selected people who feel really great with spicy food. So yeah, but anyway, spicy food does trigger your stomach lining and cause more inflammation. So that is why maybe the stool that comes out after you take a spicy food, it might not be the most pleasing even if you're enjoying it with your tongue. So yeah, no, I mean that's a problem because it triggers your stomach. Please give me a serious question. Oh, what supplement should I take after 30? So I think I get asked a lot of these questions that, I am this age, what supplement should I be taking? I'm this age, what supplement should I be taking? So I would say it doesn't start with a particular age that you need to start taking a certain supplementation. The reality is that you need to understand what your diet and lifestyle requires and what you can't make it. It could be at 25 years of age, it could be at 30 years of age. But again, if you ask me specifically, the funda I believe in supplements is start with the foundational, which are non-negotiable. You can't go away from them. There is no to them, which is going to be your primary vitamins and minerals to start with. So when I say vitamins, I say vitamin D, B12, folate, the entire B complex to a certain extent, magnesium, omega-3s. These are, I would say, the primaries you should start with. And anything that you build around is going to be depending on what your goal with your body are in the longer term. So I would say the foundational would be these, but anything beyond that is going to be dependent more on what your goals with your body are or what you're aiming in a bigger space for you. The next question is, am I bloated or did I gain weight overnight? So I think I'll take a little dig out to this question. The reason being is, whenever I'm trying to explain my patients of what bloating might be, because everybody very laxly says that, I feel very bloated, or maybe, I think I've gained weight and that is bloating. So I think first, to understand what bloating is not your 200, 300 grams going up and down. No. Bloating is this particular feeling that you're going to get in your abdominal region after consuming certain food, or maybe before that as well. So it's going to be a discomfort that you experience in your abdomen more than just feeling, the fluffiness on the face or around the entire body. And usually weight gain, extreme up and down, is usually because of inflammation inside your body, and it's nothing to do particularly with exactly bloating. So bloating, I would say, is a typical kind of abdominal discomfort that you experience, which can again be because of gut-related inflammations. But if you're experiencing a lot of fluffiness around your body, face swellings, eye swellings, that is primarily due to inflammation, and that's not weight gain. I think that's something to be differentiated from. Why does my mother call it sugar and not diabetes? I think it's as literal as it can be, because diabetes is nothing but extra sugar into your blood. And it's the oldest way of understanding that sugar into your blood is blood sugar. And that is what you call it as diabetes. But one very important thing that our parents still say wrong is sugar converts into sugar. No. It's the carbohydrates you eat, the refined carbohydrates also convert into sugar. It's the fruits, the fructose that you eat also convert into sugar on your body. So again, sugar is equals to sugar. Things that don't look like sugar is also equals to sugar. And carbs, which is very high in Indian diets, is equals to sugar inside your body. So most patients think, oh, I don't consume sugar, still my blood sugar or diabetes is under control, because you might be eating sugars which are not actually called as sugars. Is gluten intolerance real or a trend now? Again, I think I'll just tease out a little here again, because again, gluten intolerance is something that we need to, I think. But so I think when we say gluten intolerance, we've heard it around with a lot of people that, oh, I'm intolerant to gluten, or I don't, manage certain foods well, or maybe I'm not eating gluten and gluten gives me some kind of a weight gain / bloating. But there are two ways of looking at gluten sensitivities. One is definitely the genetic problem, which we call it as celiac disease, which means that your body is genetically not going to be able to recognize gluten, and your immune system starts reacting to it whenever you have gluten. So you might have immediate reactions when you take gluten. But non-celiac sensitivity, which means that your body might be triggered due to the gluten protein, and because it's not the food which is the problem, it might be your gut related inflammation which is the problem, why suddenly you become gluten sensitive over a period of time. So I would say it's not a fad, but not everybody is gluten sensitive. Considering what we see right now, everybody is putting off gluten, but it's again a very important nutrition, I would say a protein that your body requires. So yes, it's not a fad, but most of the people maybe do not have gluten sensitivity, they have a non-celiac gluten kind of a problem. Can thyroid problems cause weight gain even if I exercise? I would say yes and a no both. Because thyroid is definitely one of the most important contributor and a hormone that manages your metabolic function, which means the metabolism, how good your body digests certain food, how certain energy is produced inside your body. But like I said, it's one of the parameters or one of the hormones that manage the metabolism. So yes, thyroid can be one of the major causes if you are exercising and not losing weight, but if your free T4, free T3, your TSH, the amount of thyroid hormone is in a normal space, and still if you're trying to blame on your thyroid, I would say you're missing the bigger circle, you're missing the, you're not looking at the iceberg with the greater depth, because there might be other reasons which are associated with thyroid imbalance as well, or even weight gain or metabolic related issue. So it's like an entire puzzle where thyroid is one of a very important part, but I wouldn't say the entire puzzle depends on just your thyroid. There's definitely other functions that you need to consider before concluding that thyroid is the reason why you gain weight, or why it is difficult for you to lose weight. So the next question is, why am I so tired even after sleeping for 8 hours? I think the question says a lot about why you're still tired, because we're still looking at sleep in the terms of quantity of sleep and not the quality of sleep. So it depends on how well your body is sleeping in terms of different stages of sleep, one. Also, how well your body recovers. So the question is, maybe if you're sleeping well, but why is your body not recovering? That's a bigger question to ask. So why your body is into a fatigue stage even after sleeping for a good amount of quantity? Maybe the quality is not that great. Maybe you have a hormonal dysfunction going alongside. Maybe you have certain inflammation. Maybe subconsciously you have a lot of stress that your body is going through. And this could be biological, physiological, all kinds of stress. So I would say don't calculate sleep on the basis of quantity, rather quality and all the other factors that define the recovery of your body, and not just the amount of sleep that you get over the night. Can you suddenly become allergic to a food as an adult? Yes, you can become allergic to the food as an adult. The answer is definitely a yes. But the bigger question still remains here. Is the food a problem, or are you the problem? Because I would suggest it's not the food, because something that you've eaten all throughout your life, and suddenly if you're facing problems in digesting that food, it's your gut that is not able to digest or break down that food. So just ask yourself that simple question: if I have digested something for so many years of my life, why suddenly my body cannot accept it? So I would say that it is primarily the gut which would be a major responsible factor for why suddenly you have sensitivity and you cannot digest or break down certain food. Again, there could be factors which are your gut microbiome, there could be more intestinal permeability that you're dealing with. So there could be gut related dysfunctions which could be the primary cause of why you cannot suddenly tolerate certain food which you've done all throughout your life. So look into gut rather than pinting or finding the food. The reality is because you can't devoid yourself of food one by one. And usually people with food sensitivity start with one food, but if you see it over the period of 2-3 years, it's a list of food that they become sensitive to. And the problem is you can't eliminate everything because you will not be able to sustain, your body will lack the nutrition after that. So again, food is not the culprit, it's your immune system, it could be your gut related dysfunctions which suddenly do not tolerate the food that well. Oh, nice question, okay. How do I know that I'm lactose intolerant? Okay. I think again, this has become another word people use very loosely. I see patients coming into the clinic also and saying, oh, I'm lactose intolerant, I'm gluten intolerant. I would say, how can you check it is a very simple way. Now, first let's start to understand why somebody becomes lactose intolerant, because more than gluten, we've heard people being lactose intolerant quite more of lately. So usually we have this enzyme inside our gut, inside our small intestine, and which is, if you look at your small intestine, these are like finger-like projections. Now on those finger-like projections, you usually have these smaller villi-like structures, and they have these enzyme, which we call it as lactase. Now this enzyme is present in all the human beings right from the day they are born. And usually this enzyme is higher in kids, or I would say as infants, because you end up taking a lot of milk. So now this lactase enzyme is the responsible factor for why milk can break down easily inside our gut. Now usually because of multiple gut related inflammations, or again multiple causes that might be digestion issue or intestinal impermeability, or what we very loosely call as leaky gut now, multiple factors or triggers to your gut could gradually decline the lactase formation. Now, just because there is an absence of lactase, your body may not be able to break down milk, and this might be the simple problem that you are lactose intolerant. Now, it's very common to have this lactase enzyme reduce over time and as you age. So it's quite normal if you're becoming lactose intolerant. Maybe by working on your gut and giving yourself some lactase enzyme, you might be able to still tolerate lactose. But why you would still not want to insult your gut with lactose? The more food you take inside your body that your body cannot digest and absorb, you're causing more and more triggers and inflammation to your body in that case. So again, if you figured out, and how you can figure that out is, if you're suspecting you have lactose intolerance, maybe just for a period of 21 days, absolutely stop taking all kind of milk related products. I would say even milk, curd, paneer, everything that you think has higher amount of milk, try to put it down inside your diet. On the 22nd day, try to reintroduce everything one by one into your lifestyle. If in that one by one phase, again make sure that you do not reintroduce everything together. So maybe day 22nd you start with curd, you give it a 7-day period to see how your body reacts to it. And if your body doesn't show you any signs, it could be abdominal signs also, it could be body related irritability or any other symptoms that went in those 21 days. If you don't feel anything, you can absolutely start taking them. So now, majorly with lactose intolerance, the most common signs that patients face is the bloating that they experience, the abdominal discomfort that they experience, diarrhea that they experience. And this time period is very typical. It's not a problem like people have with milk allergy that they're going to start reacting, but these abdominal discomfort starts right from, I would say, 30 minutes, and it can range from good 30 minutes to a 3 to 4 days as well in certain cases. So when you stop taking these triggering milk or certain foods and completely eliminate them off, and when you try to reintroduce, you will definitely be able to understand if you are tolerating lactose or not. So if you do not experience any symptoms, I would say be rest assured that you can completely start taking lactose. But if you experience any deviation in terms of your moods also to a certain extent or abdominal issue, you might be lactose intolerant. Is it true protein damages your kidneys? So I think this is one of my favorite topics, which is protein, because primary, I think protein from almost 1980s, it has been considered as some kind of a villain due to some misinterpretation of a really old study that was carried around. So I'll start from there, because at some point it'll start making senses and my answer will come right through if protein is good or bad. So somewhere in the early 1980s, there was an hypothesis that whenever the person was taking higher amount of protein, the amount of blood which was going into the kidneys, the way kidneys were actually filtering, was getting much more. The activity at the level of the kidney in terms of the blood activity or the pooling of the blood or the filtration, which was the primary work of the kidney, was getting accelerated or was increasing. Now, that was the only thing they figured out, that when you eat protein, your kidney works harder. But let me ask you a question. If a woman is pregnant and her heart rate usually is normal, does it mean that pregnancy and heart rate is a problem and pregnancy is a problem to heart related issues? The answer is a no. Because whenever you are going to eat higher amount of protein, it is eventually going to have more burden, because protein needs to break down into urea, amino acids, and that is why your kidney will be functioning a little bit more than what they are doing on a baseline, because protein gets absorbed there. Secondarily, the interpretation that was actually took after that hypothesis was that if somebody is already going through a kidney damage, or what we call it as a chronic kidney disease, in those patients you cannot give a very high amount of protein. Again, coming from the same hypothesis, because if the kidney is working, I would say, on a little less amount of energy, and if you give extra work to the kidney, it might not be the best way to work on it. So again, the corrected sentence that actually was that a person who has CKD or any other kidney related issues, in them giving higher amount of protein can cause issues to their progressively worsening kidney always. But considering a normal person does not have any problems with kidney related issues, or I would say has no major dysfunctions in kidney, you should, and ideally is the most important thing to give, because protein is one of the most important building blocks of your muscles, and that is what defines longevity as well. So again, protein is absolutely important, and for patients who have CKD also, just higher protein is something that you should avoid. A basic 0.6 to 0.8 grams for their muscle recovery and for their mitochondrial health is very much important. But again, not excessively, but again, we need to give them also protein for recovery. The last question's the best. Do I really need protein powder, or is it normal, or is normal food enough? I call protein as my convenience food. So if a person is not taking adequate amount of protein in their diet, now adequate for everybody could be different, because this is going to be calculated on your body weight. So I would say a baseline 0.8 to 1 gram is a must for anybody, even sitting all day in their beds. But somebody who is doing a little higher workout or more, I would say, active into their lifestyle, somewhere between 1 to 1.2 is important. Somebody who is more active or has muscle strength training or does some kind of activities, for them even ranging somewhere between 1.8 to 2 grams might be important. So number one, if you're not meeting these basic requirement of protein, you're actually doing worse to your body than thinking about anything else. So I would say protein is a must. Again, according to your body weight and body requirement, is a must. And at the same time, why I call it as a convenience food, the protein powders, because where we live right now, what we all are eating, and especially if we have vegetarians around, it's impossible to reach that protein to a higher level. And I'm not saying there's going to be diligent people sitting and calculating and doing it, absolutely. But it is very difficult for a person to calculate and reach that higher amount of protein. Anytime anybody is between 1.2 or 2 grams of protein, it's very difficult to meet it by just food sources. So now, while we understand that protein needs to be taken, it's a must for the body, then completing the requirement with a protein powder has no harm. If you don't take that protein powder is a bigger concern. And while I say that, I'm also sure that if you have whole foods that meet your basic requirement of protein very well, absolutely feel free to get through food. But it's a challenge to make it only possible through your body requirement with food. So I call protein as primarily a convenience food to actually keep my body on a baseline wellness or healthy.